Welcome to The Lumber Word, where industry veterans Matt Beamer, Greg Riley, Charles Dilatori, and Ashley Buckhold dissect the world of commodity lumber each week. We bring you up-to-date insights on supply, demand, and market trends, plus use our combined experience to tell you what it all means. Join us for informative and entertaining discussions that guarantee to make you wiser about all things lumber.
Everybody, welcome to this week's episode of The Lumber Word, episode 119 on April 23rd, 2025. Lots to talk about. Great guest this week, Thomas Mende from Binderholz. Thomas, I saw your official title on LinkedIn is CSO, Chief Sales Officer. Is that, do I have that correct?
That's something my finance boss came up with. So yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And I've known Thomas for a long time. Greg's known Thomas for a long time. And whenever we get really confused about lumber and especially Euro, Greg's like, get Thomas on because he always has some really good input. And I saw you up for a few minutes in the lobby, didn't have time to talk to you, but I wanted you to just talk a little bit about what Binderholz is first, what you do. You've got the mills in Florida, North Carolina doing the pine, plus all the mills over in Europe, specialty products, mass timber. Let us know a little bit about what you've been up to.
So quick summary of Binderholz now is that we're officially the largest lumber producer out of Europe. So that includes, when we say the largest in Europe, it includes our production of our two Southern Pine sawmills. We should rank anywhere between 4, 5, 6, depending on who you believe in terms of worldwide lumber production now. But what makes us really unique is that we sell a large quantity of our own lumber production to our value-added plants. That's the cross-laminated timber plant, the large glulam beam plant, and then we have a product that we're just introducing this year to the US, the micro CLT, a small panel or thin panel that looks just like edge glued, basically large pieces of wood. And so those are our three main value-added products, but we're also in the nursery business. We're in forestry services and forest management. We own the largest pallet manufacturer in the UK, and we're a large distributor of timber products in the UK. And just sometimes it's a little bit hard to believe all the different things we're into. We make pallet blocks, pallets out of pressed wood, and we also own part of a company that makes wooden sheds on the British Isles. So
I figured you did a lot when I see all the different events that you have pictures of that you're at on social media, not just selling sticks. So you're so how do people get a hold of Binderholz to talk to you, to buy from you, and what would you suggest? What type of customers are you looking for?
Yeah, so actually, because of some of the different product lines we have, we're kind of getting outside the traditional lumber distribution channel. So that could include architects, interior designers, and the whole mass timber universe, or project developers that look to build buildings that were, I would say, traditionally built with steel and concrete. That's really the typical mass timber.
Yeah. Thomas, listening to you, I mean, it makes me realize how, what a small corner of the wood products business that we deal in day to day, and that being, commodity lumber, and how much like a bigger world it is when you look at, globally, all the things that Binder is doing, kind of what's your overarching, hey, how is the overall wood products business with the diversification that you have? Is it great? Is it okay? Is it, not so good? What would be your overarching opinion of, the global situation now?
Yeah, I would say some of the advantages we have because we're globally diversified, and we're also pretty much down the line of the distribution chain. So with our distribution business, we also service home centers directly to store in Europe. So we're still doing quite all right, I would say, in terms of the business, but it's not great, right? So I think there's been significant changes in European production. There's been significant changes definitely in worldwide demand for lumber, whether or not that's coming in a reduction out of China or of Middle East, and definitely out of Europe. So it's definitely a much more challenging environment than it's been in the last few years there. It's a completely different environment and a different challenge than it was last year. So it's always changing, and who knows what's in store now with tariffs and with is there peace settlement? Can there be a peace settlement? I mean, I would imagine there's so many scenarios in my head right now when it comes to all these various variables of what could make the market go absolutely haywire or completely kaput. So
We were down in at the Montreal Wood Convention a couple weeks ago, which was really great. And I had a couple of conversations with some people that said, "Hey, Greg, we love the show. You talk about European lumber a lot, but you really don't know what you're talking about." And so this is kind of what prompted me. I said, Ash, I got kind of like, people said, "Hey, Greg, you really don't know what you're talking about." And so that's why, I prompted Ashley to see if we could get you on to, help give the listeners like the real skinny is when you look at European commodity lumber coming to the U.S., where's it at? What's going to happen in the next, 30, 60, 90 days? What's your crystal ball saying? And I understand that, we all have it. It's a little cloudy, but I know that you always have some really good insight.
So always remember what I say first is that European sawmills, because of the way their sawmills are set up and the type of technology that they use, can make a wide variety of lumber sizes that enables them to shift from market to market depending on which one is most profitable. This is a very different setup than anybody in North America. We have the same setup in our pine mills, and it's also enabled us to kind of bypass these terrible pine prices as they occur in certain items. So given that fact, you have to look at really the scenario over the last few weeks. The landscape has dramatically changed. Tariff threats are one thing, but one thing that's happened since I would say the fall of 2024 is that log prices in Europe have dramatically increased. So we're talking about increases anywhere from 40 to 50, 60%, depending on the region in Europe that you're in. This puts tremendous amount of pressure on the sawmills and their production schedules. So now comes this tariff miracle, this Liberation Day for many, and now comes a tremendous amount of uncertainty. Now comes a drop in the lumber market from all this mess and a possible demand reduction, possible, I say, because I'm not 100% convinced yet that it's really occurring, and now, but I think the bigger issue that I've been concerned with over the last couple of weeks, last 2 weeks, is really the US dollar. So if you look at the US dollar, it's lost in value a good 9 to 10% against the euro. So take that as a direct reduction in return to the mills in Europe of about 8 or 9% after the freight advantage is taken out of. And for Sweden, I think it's even 14-15%. I looked at that morning because that's been kind of the Swedish magic pill for the last few years, is that their currency has been pretty weak, but even they gained even faster than the euro against the dollar. So that's a direct reduction in return. It would be you add that on top of the drop in prices in the lumber market, that definitely makes for a very bitter taste in the mouth. And so this is kind of like where I don't know if you want enlightenment from me or more confusion. I'll give you more confusion.
We like both.
But I gave you the reason why you should be confused.
Are you starting to see like a drop in future bookings for May shipment, June shipment yet? Or is that not filtered through yet?
So first we must say last year, shipments from Europe were down by the end of the year. So I think it's not for every month of the year, but by the end of the year it was roughly 24% from Europe.
Down 24%.
Down down 24% from the
That was the
previous year.
run. That was the run
Now we're
rate at the
down
end of the
another
year, not the. Not that
end
was the
of the year.
run rate
That's
at the end of the year, not the annualized
right.
rate. Right.
Yeah, yeah. Annualized was 16, I think. So then that certainly continued. So there was not the big surge that you come. I love the comments in Montreal said, "Oh man, all the ports are full." Well, that's only because before there were 14 ports where people brought in lumber. Now there's about 4 or 5 ports where people bring in lumber. That's why the port is full. So the reality is there's significant less lumber already on the ground than there was last year at this time. And given that the situation that I described earlier, I don't see there being a big boost of any sort of fashion in any way. If anything, there will probably be a further reduction in shipments, um, and other alternatives will be sought to this market.
You get a pretty good look at what the what the home center business is. Do you see that business steady, slightly down, slightly higher than it has been first half of last year?
Yeah, it's really hard to say what is the reason for it, but at least in our home center business, the volume has been really good. But is this because of the traditional DIYer or because the home centers are able to capture more of the pro business? That we don't know, and we don't see. Only the partners would know that for sure. But it's been quite strong. Of course, this was Easter week. This is generally speaking the best time of the year is to go into the Easter week. And we'll see now how the next couple of weeks will go, if we see any sort of demand. But just in general, I would say this is why I haven't given up on the demand side yet. Is I would have expected that if we'd seen some traumatic, catastrophic drop off in demand, that we would have seen much faster reaction on that cycle of the business. And I have not seen it yet. So, and I'm knock on wood on that because I certainly don't think I want it. So, hopefully we'll maintain
We got some
that.
good news.
And
I'm sorry. No,
I
did get some.
agree. If you were going to talk about the new
Right,
home
we did get
sales,
some
then
good news.
I thought it was a
Right,
really
we
good
got some
number.
good news
and,
this
and
morning
even,
with the new home sales
Yeah.
number. 724,000 units, which was up, well above consensus, and it dropped the inventory of homes down to 8.3 months. Prices continue to fall, which is moving into affordability. I mean, if we actually got some interest rate decreases, that would probably be a real positive. And I guess from my perspective, I look at it as I said, I don't know, maybe you have this number, like what percent now of new homes is, the big national builders versus, what percentage of the total is them?
That's funny you say that. I think I read something about. I saw the number 14% just a minute ago. So, but I don't know if this was 14% of total home sales is new home sales, or was 14% was the large national builders. But if you look the national builders quarterly statement last couple of days came out. I think Pulte came out. I was actually quite positively surprised, A, by the sales number, B, by their future closings number was actually quite strong. And when you looked at their pipeline that was ready for sale, it was not that 8.3 number. So that I found a very curious, funny. I think it was more like a two or three. Let's say a quarter. No, sorry, it was about 4 months.
Ash, what was that
Not 4
stat that
months
you
of
had
pipeline.
on a couple of the
Yeah.
national home builders the other day? I thought was really interesting.
So I was looking at the difference between Lennar and DR Horton and their margin compression versus their the amount of their sales. And some of them had to do whatever it took to move some inventory, but they are. And it's also, some of them are in different areas. Like if you're heavier to Texas and Florida, you're probably not, you're probably having a little bit more margin compression than you are if you're building in Columbus, Ohio, and some other areas, right? Where the business is still pretty decent. It's just but they're doing what they have to do to move stuff from what I'm seeing without having to drop prices yet. But Greg, you popped your head in my office this morning, and his word was these home builders are going to have to drop prices at some point, right?
So the new home number, I mean, the median price was down 1.9% from February, and was down, what was it down below February? And 7.5% below last year's price. So, that's somewhat misleading in that it doesn't factor in the change in the distribution of the size of the homes and the price of the homes, right? I mean, if we know that lots of the big national builders are continuing to build smaller homes so that they can sell them more affordably.
Well, smaller homes, less amenities in them, less.
Tiny houses.
Charles,
so really what you're saying is that their margins haven't been compressed as many would think, just looking at that data based on the actual product that they're putting to market. Is that a fair statement?
Well, their margins are down. That's for sure.
Well, I know, but it's not a 1-for-1, I guess is my point, right?
And my sense is, that I still think that their margins are running above the longer term average. They really blew up during the COVID years, and they've fought really hard to hang on to that.
Hey, Thomas, you mentioned something that was pretty interesting, and you're right. I think the euro is only coming to about 4 ports now, right? I mean, some of the other ports are. Is that because the different? Did you throw in there, Greg, that whole thing with the Chinese vessels, et cetera, and like why are there less ports being used?
Well, I mean, I'd like to believe that we were the majority of the shipments from Europe to begin with, and we changed our strategy completely, and we withdrew from a number of ports and really concentrated on 2 major ports and 2 minors. So the 2 majors, we run our own vessel now that we charter. So that we changed our logistics strategy completely, and because our volume was kind of the base volume to some of these other ports, there's no more tagging along basically. So if you don't have a significant amount of volume on a boat, you can't call the port. So I think that's the main message there. So that's changed. So now let's take this Chinese vessel thing to it. It's going to be a very interesting scenario, right? Because a number of these charter companies that come from Europe run the Chinese vessels, or at least have a portion of their fleet in the Chinese vessel scenario. So that will change things again dramatically. It will take the total amount available to ship down to a much smaller number of vessels. So even if you had a major run, it might impact that ability to service.
Thomas, I think I was pretty vocal. I don't know if you followed it at all over the last 6 months, and saying that there wouldn't be any tariffs on, any 25% tariff on Canadian lumber. I've further gone now and said that there's not going to be any 232 tariffs on lumber from anywhere. I'm going to go out on the limb again and say that, this ruling that came in on Friday was effective 6 months out. And I think that I'm not going to be surprised if somewhere between here and there that gets adjusted. That it was interesting. I was sharing with a friend yesterday, one of my more liberal friends, as a matter of fact, that I liken the current administration. If you are familiar with the movie Apocalypse Now, have you seen the movie?
Yes.
Yeah, I've done.
Oh,
no,
yeah. Well, it's a great movie. You should see it. But anyhow, there's a scene in there near the end that where Marlon Brando asked Martin Sheen that people say that his methods had become unsound, and he asked him, "Do you think that my methods are unsound?" And he looked at him and said, "I see no method at all."
So you're saying there's a correlation?
That's where I'm at right now.
So when I think of method, the word madness comes to mind. There's a method to your
Yeah.
madness. So this is the big
You're going to have
question.
to see the movie.
So,
they did a redux on it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Now,
probably one of the most classic Vietnam area movies. So
1976, I think.
yeah, it was a long time ago.
So let's just flip gears since you mentioned
After that, right, Ash?
Well, yeah, no, that's fine. You mentioned your Southern Yellow Pine mill in Charles. That's right in his backyard, in his ballywick. Is you've got the mills similar to the mills that are set up in Europe, the way that you cut, the way that you keep log decks, etc. And I mean the capacity of those two mills, from what I remember, is pretty significant. I don't know what you're currently running at those two mills, but you've got capacity where you can. I mean, they're pretty damn big mills. What's going on with Southern Yellow Pine East Side? I see that just keep running up, and when I look at that compared to West Side, it's about as wide as it got, except during one time in COVID. So that lets me think either the lumber is staying really local, and it's just going up the eastern seaboard, not going west, not going into Nashville or those areas, or the freight is so high it's being absorbed into that right now. What do you see the reason for the $75 spread between East Side and West Side Southern Pine? And
you're talking 2x4,
Well,
2x4,
right?
Yeah.
and is because you're
2x4,
that's a
right?
big
Because
that's your
on
big production,
whites
right?
it's the opposite, which is kind of interesting. Yeah. So we do all the sizes actually, but that's a great question because I'm still trying to figure out the Southern Yellow Pine market after 35 years
Yeah.
in it. So and I would say with all the capacity that's been added over the last, particularly over the last 10 years, it was really kick-started by the Klausner mills, and then everybody jumped on and did the same thing and building more and more mills. The volatility of it is at levels I don't ever recall, right? There's no long-term runs of anything to speak of. I mean, I think there's mornings and evenings are completely different. One length can be hot, another one ice cold. It's a really fantastic, I would call it a classic oversupplied market in many ways, but certainly something is going on, and something is either we have some species switching going on because of the difference between the spruce and pine. I do believe that the treated side is probably better than expected through the home centers. I think there's some action on that, and then there's definitely some hot action on the board side. Most likely caused by changes out of Brazil, some shipping issues and higher shipping costs, and so some delays. So there's a whole lot more things going on that play into the mix than we can always imagine in our own head. We take the position, we'll take it while we can. But I think the beautiful thing about our mills is that we can switch around, and we do switch around, and of course we make, I think, 8 or 9 different thicknesses in lumber. We make rough lumber, we make S4S lumber, we make different things that nobody else does. We're opening up new markets for SYP all over the world that didn't really exist. I think you'll see by the end of this year, the SYP export statistics will have some major changes because we've been able to create new markets for Southern Yellow Pine where they should be, and given that expansion that we had in Southern Yellow Pine, whether or not it finds its way treated to customers around the world, but we kind of have an obligation to have new markets, because if we just focus on our own domestic market and cycle demand and seasonal demand that SYP exhibits, we're all going to go broke, because it's going to be so extremely volatile from one way to the next that I don't see a big future. So as an industry, we have to really invest in finding new markets, and that means overseas markets.
So this is interesting in what you said there, because when I'm looking at East Side Southern Pine, and I see 2x4 being 150 to 160 above all the rest of the widths. I mean, so would that mean that saying, hey, how quickly are your mills able to react and change their cutting profile to take advantage of, these type of market moves? I mean, you switch over
we
like
changed
next,
we changed
like,
it
are you
recently.
switching over right now and saying, hey, we're not going to make 2x12s at, under $400, but we're going to like make all the 2x4 we can in the mid 500s?
Yeah, we definitely make major dramatic. I'm not sure we can offset 12s and 4s, but we do make daily adjustments in a way to the productivity. And it's not just like in a traditional pine mill where am I going to take my 6-inch down to 4-inch because there's too much wane and makes the number 2 if I take the wane off. So that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about really changing cutting patterns that are planned up front. I think maybe one other thing that we're seeing with the 2x4 side is that multifamily seems to be a lot stronger than we may give it credit for. I think this is where the change was in February starts, and I think it's definitely poised to increase. And maybe there's a little bit more in the bush on the demand side than we thought. I hope it stays there and continues.
So I do have a question. Now that we're talking about something I have some knowledge of. So I was just sitting here answering emails. I'll be honest, just letting y'all talk. Have your moment in the sun.
Charles, hey, welcome to the show, Charles. Welcome to the show.
So theoretically, right? And I'm just thinking out loud here. So if you have the ability, and to piggyback on Greg's question, what is that timeline to where you can take advantage of a spread, right? So obviously 4 and 8-inch manufacturing costs are wildly different based on per lug board footage, right? So, when you look at net returns, how fast can you go from a 2x8 to a 2x4 to a 2x6 based on order files and what you see coming up? Based on the technology base that you have compared to the historic Southern Yellow Pine facility.
We don't keep a large order file ahead of us, and we really only have an order file on 2x4.
Oh, really?
Because we know we'll always do it and we'll always make it. Have I lost you?
No, we're good. You're good. You're good.
So why is that? Just out of curiosity, because everybody in the Southern, not everybody. Oh, there he goes.
Well, he'll be back in a second here.
These are questions I'm trying to understand.
This one will cost me this week.
Sorry, guys.
There you go. All right, you guys. So
I was just telling you the secret of life. Did you hear it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Where were you about 3 years ago?
No doubt.
So we've had, I would say we only keep really an order file on 2x4 because we know we'll make it every day. So it's not something that we'll turn off. I mean, don't really have much of a choice to make a 2x4. But in the other sizes, we really just work on orders or let's say take advantage of situations. And in that case, we don't have, we really don't have much of a lead time. So we can go extremely fast.
But is that, I guess, given the current volatility and some of the points that you're talking about, right? In your opinion, your, storied tenure in this industry, is that the best way to do it? Because the idea is to kind of flatline that price risk, right? So if you have an opportunity to create and I'm just asking questions, right?
That's a good question. No, it's a highly philosophical question too within our company, right? So
wait, Charles, he asked a philosophical question.
Yeah, he's a philosopher. He's a lumber philosopher. Yeah, of course. With that, imagine. I mean, he has already a name for it. It's still wonderful, Charles Delatorre, the philosopher.
I need the rest of the alphabet after my name as well.
No, it's an interesting discussion because it's a discussion within our company, on what are we basing this on, right? And we're basing this on Thomas saying, 2x10 are going to go up because they've been so low for so long and it's rainy season coming. Or we're basing it on what prices are currently, what random lengths is showing, and so on. So I do think that we're still a little bit in the learning phase internally on that, how to best maximize it on the dimension lumber side. But I do think where the real diversification comes from is on all these other sizes, and all these other things that we do. Those are really
from different markets globally. Great, I agree with you 110%.
Is really that's really the buffer that we're talking about, right? So think about last year when every mill in the South had to make 2x6s at $245 a thousand. I mean, what a disaster! You might as well just burn a stash of cash. So we didn't have to do that. And I think this is, I'd rather have that advantage than squeeze out the most in the best of times real quick and have the inventory on the ground. So.
No, I mean, that makes sense. I just, I don't know. Everybody, like I said, everybody's got a different philosophy based on their position in the supply chain. But I just, I look at it, and there's certain times, especially how we go to market and some of the future book that we have and the volume that we have it, and kind of at the scale and time frame, if the risk is profitable, right? As long as you can hedge it in some sort of fashion. And historically, the Southern Yellow Pine business is random +5 or random at a discount or random delivered, right? And I'm just trying to understand where that philosophy could change, especially with an overseas influence, right? Obviously, with the diversification with your European or North African spec boards that y'all pull in infield, some of these other things and these ancillary products that you do, which give you the opportunity to not burn a stash of cash at $245, right? But if there's an opportunity for, just kind of a change of philosophy in how some of these guys go to market. And that's really the question, especially based on the diversification that Bender has as a whole.
So could you repeat the question?
I mean, but part of the deal, Charles, is there is like, that's like unique to pine mills. Most of the mills don't have anywhere near the same type of flexibility. I mean, I remember when we had a sales for a mill in North Carolina years ago.
I just got off the phone with him 30 minutes ago. Actually.
And we had a similar situation where 2x4s were really high, and 2x4 16s were $500 and 2x12s were $300, and they decided no, it's still better for us to just keep running 2x12. I'm like, what? How can that be? But
it's net return to the mill.
Right. It's in how that mill's set up, in the lack of the flexibility. So, but I still think, I mean, if I could put the swap on right now, buy eastside 2x12, sell eastside 2x4. I think I'd load the boat up on it.
You can do that. Sell the CME and buy the 2x12.
No bid. No bid, brother. No bid.
You know what would be really cool is if we were able to trade the CME contract with some sort of basis of a delivered city. Because then as I've discussed and I've mentioned and we've all discussed, it's more of a basis freight calculation. And it's not just, okay, it's somewhere in North South Carolina or Georgia.
Then you could do the arbitrage between east side and west side.
Bingo.
But yep. Yeah, no, but that capability does not exist right now.
Hey, Thomas, your mill in Florida and North Carolina, what is the capacity of both of those mills?
I can't really say, I mean, if you look back at the whole...
he could tell you, but he'd have to kill you.
Yeah, but let me just say this, they're running extremely well, and they made major investments, and now that has occurred, the volume is definitely on the increase. And I would say they're definitely world-class facilities today, and will be more. And
the reason I'm asking is I remember years ago when they were going in. I mean, a traditional Southern pine mill is 100 million board feet, maybe 200. These were 500 million plus or something when they were first.
Yeah, I think the capacity is still there. The question is the shift personnel there? I think this is what everybody.
That's a huge question.
I know, but I mean,
struggles with in industry, but it's definitely running in probably higher rates than that actually. So it's
which is amazing for a Southern pine mill. I mean, that's crazy when you think about it.
Yeah, I would still say that all the new mills that have been built there, I think they're pretty much publishing or saying they have the same kind of productivity numbers or similar numbers than that. The question is also what is the reality of it? But again, it's on a very basic product mix, so it's not really on something that we do. So I commend our mill guys. I think they've done a fantastic job whipping these mills into shape now. I'm really, really proud of showing them now, so this is a completely different situation from 5 years ago or 6 years ago. And they're definitely something. So
is all of the lumber that comes out of your mills, the Southern pine mills, is it all paper wrapped?
Yeah, at this point, still paper wrapped, unless we have customers that require and request it not be paper wrapped. and so I think that's a big advantage as well for us.
It's a huge
in this.
advantage.
Yeah.
It's a huge. I still believe a lot of people don't want to make a switch on certain things because it's not paper wrapped. And you know, you ask a Southern Pine Mill to paper wrap something, it's like asking them to go to work on Sunday, right? They don't want to do
It's
it.
not quite that bad.
It's
but it is
$20
pretty
a
bad.
thousand, $15 a thousand.
We're in the South, Ash. We go to church on Sunday.
There you go.
No,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
crazy though.
nice.
Like,
I tell you where you don't go. You don't go to Chick-fil-A on Sunday.
No, you don't.
But
No,
with that,
you don't.
with that said, with the Southern Pine, one thing that Greg, you pointed out the other day, and we saw. So there was some switching going on. Now we're back to where spruce 8s, 10s, and 12s are cheaper than Southern Pine, and people are switching back the other direction again.
I think the species versatility is what needs to happen, right? That is the purest form of a free market. Whoever's got the best deal at any given time, right? And price discovery is all part of it. And I also think too, you've got some guys that had to go in and educate their customer base on the species swap. They saw a cost savings. Now their customer may or may not pay attention to it, or there's an opportunity for them to not have to educate upon every renewal of price locks. And they're going back and buying more inventory. But the problem with that is that you're going to get into a situation where all this wood or potential wood sits and reloads, and then you have all these changes, AD, CVD, then you have the reduction of Euro imports and all the rest of it, to where it's going to be a forced hand in very specific regions to where it's a necessity. And it's not just, I'm going to do it for a price check. My personal opinion. Could be wrong. I've been wrong before, but
next.
Not on this show. You haven't been wrong. You haven't been wrong on this
Well, it's
show.
only me.
You know, I mean, where you've been wrong, I don't know, but you know, not on this show. Yeah. Come on.
Yeah.
Charles, what's going on with Southern Pine today? Like, what is? Are you buying and selling at those numbers on 4-inch?
I'm not buying. I mean, I bought so much volume in late February and early March. I haven't had to really buy volume in 4-inch in 45 days. And it's just worked out to our advantage. And 6-inch, we all saw a 6-inch break, canary in a coal mine. I think, once again, I'll make the call. 4-inch has got too much fluff. And there's some deals that have been had. We bought some. I've covered some wood at some pretty big discounts to what last week's quoted levels were delivered. But I don't know the longevity of it, because you still have so many variables. And to Thomas's point, the volatility is intangible when you start talking about a truck market that can change from 9, 10 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
So we've noticed the truck market starting to actually lighten up a little bit in the last week. Finally.
Oh, I'm just talking about truck market from mill to mill.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
I think Charles, I always say the same thing. You know, I think the big difference between spruce and pine is in spruce, people have time and have to allow for time for the product to arrive.
Yep.
In pine, everybody expects the load to show up next day. And I think this is the big difference between the species of the volatility of the craziness that goes on. It's a hard one to explain, but you know, we can go long distance. We can cover a lot of area out of the pine region very quickly with the truck. You know, we can reach, you know, quite fast. So I do think it's here to stay. I think the only way we're going to get it out is, you know, some older mills will probably have to decide to close the doors, or we'll have to have major changes in demand or new markets. I think that will change that business.
So what are you doing down in Dallas? Anything good?
You know, I'm trying to do my good deed for the year. You know, I'm at Earth X. So
right on. It was Earth Day yesterday.
Earth Day was yesterday. I'm in the brunt of the environmentalist. If you remember the Anatole, where we used to have our NOLA conventions, and in the early NOLA days, the Greenpeace guys were throwing blood on the wall, and
I remember that.
Gave us all a hard time. So I've gone into the mouth of the lion and
belly of the beast.
Belly of the beast. I'm preaching about the amazing environmental benefits of wooden construction and of how sawmills are utilizing every piece of the tree that arrives at the facility into some product, and how some of these products can be improved so they're environmentally more friendly. So it's part of our, you know, mass timber and our company-wide zero waste principle. We have a couple different
Thomas, maybe
innovative
talk a
products
little
that
bit
we
more
use.
about the mass timber business in the U.S. at this point, and the stage of development that you see it at, and what your projections are for growth opportunity. How's that product flow to market? Maybe help
Yeah,
educate
other
me.
than I would say the biggest difference from about a year ago or so when I was last on the show is that the general situation with the office market and the multifamily market had changed quite dramatically. So I would say the amount of projects continues to increase.
Mm-hmm.
There's more and more producers of mass timber products in the marketplace. That may not be a bad thing. They may be making things more competitive in the short term, but in the long term, it's important for the industry to grow. So the only challenge really is the interest rate environment that really takes this away from a bigger space. I do think that eventually we'll have to have somebody on the distribution side step out and do what the European distributors have done and said, okay, well, I'm gonna I put panels into the distribution system that can be of a certain size that becomes more of a commodity CLT panel product that I can use for smaller projects, single family homes, add-ons, and so on. I think that's definitely something that will be happening here in the next 2 years. As people just can't sit by and idly and say, what are we going to do here? So it generally goes, directly to developers or big construction companies. It becomes part of the overall bid package. So it's a completely different sale than lumber. It's much more difficult to sell, I would say, than what you and I are used to. It's not like you can lower the price and now you get an order. You may pursue something for 3 years and nothing comes of it. And so that's
But all right,
not
so
something lumber guys are used to.
interesting thing about mass timber and CLT and all that. So I mean that micro product that y'all produce, is that kind of a segue into a single family application? And the reason why I ask is because the rustic feel of housing and big timber and what have you is such a big thing now for single family, whether it's custom or track. Is that kind of how you're trying to educate the consumer base, kind of in an ancillary step?
So if you look so aside from the fact that it's a panel that can be used for any wood product, wood interior woodworking project, it gives you it has a chance for it to be a remodeling product on everyday basis. So an existing office building, for example, that's 30 years old, can literally be spruced up, no pun intended, through the panels and made look like a mass timber building. It's a very quick conversion, right?
Yep.
But in its basic form, they were primarily promoting it through the regular distribution chain. It's really a very quick way of installing paneling, ceilings, wall panels, floor panels in terms of areas where you might go barefoot or with socks, like an attic or something like that. It's an extremely fast installation of a better stable product where the tongue doesn't come apart over the years and you don't see the movement from a TNG product. So it has, of course, a different look. It's a more modern look, but it's definitely very, very clean. And the fact is, it's fast, it's speedy. Anybody can install it. I might even try to do it myself, but it's just a screw in of it's an amazing product for anybody that's ever worked with it, loves it, will never go back and uses it. So at this point, it's just a matter of getting it out there.
Like the cost? What's the cost difference on a total installed basis on a project versus, like if I look at a 3-story apartment building, versus stick build to go mass timber?
Yeah. Yeah, that all depends. I would say it all depends on if you look at total construction costs versus, what's the wall cost. If you compare wall to wall, you'll never win with mass timber. You will always lose that comparison.
Okay.
But if you look at total construction cost, which includes time savings, labor savings, which means cash flow earlier because the construction is finished earlier, I would say that even in a 3-story building now, you probably would come ahead. What we're kind of seeing on this, and of course this is the construction CLT, not the micro CLT that Charles was talking about. On this construction CLT, we see two major trends. One is in the multifamily space, the use of mass timber panels in the ceiling and floor application. So there's obviously a lot of time wasted and spent, and a lot of material being used, expensive engineered material being used. So that's a trend that we're following closely. And then also elevator shafts and stairwell shafts that are much faster built using cross-laminated
And let's
timber
not
panels.
forget on Earth Week the carbon sequestration or the carbon
Carbon capture.
the carbon capture.
Carbon
There
capture.
you go.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have
So
all the you don't
embodied
have all the,
carbon. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
You don't have all the cement trucks on the road. You don't have all that going on. So
Unfortunately, nobody, I mean, people feel good about that, but the problem is developers don't like to put that into dollars. They should put a
it's
value
hard
on
to.
it, but
Yeah.
I was listening. So it was not a project of ours, but the developer here is Crow Holding. This is also the Crow family puts on this event, and so they built a mass timber building here in Frisco. And I'm gonna distribute on the internet his speech that he gave yesterday about his building and what he learned about mass timber construction, because it's always better coming out of the developer's mouth than out of me. If I say it, I just want to sell mass timber panels, but if he says it, it becomes definitely more believable. And he's a complete believer now that he built one, he will build the next one. So it's definitely something that'll continue.
That's great. That's great.
Hey, Charles, real quick, what's going on with OSB?
It's flat. flat.
Okay.
Not exciting at all.
Oh, which is is flat the precursor usually for lower prices?
Typically, depending on longevity of a flat market, right? I mean, if you have a flat market 3, 4, 5 weeks, it finds a trading range, and it has a tendency to be higher than that original level. But I think we also have the same bottlenecks that we have in everything else, right? I think, people are looking at freight costs, they're looking at, 4-inch market that seems inflated on the east side, all these variables, and they bought a lot of inventory, right? There's a lot of people that have a lot of wood on the ground. I talked to a guy in the board business, and he sells all your big box, and he said, they all have 4 to 8 weeks inventory, and they're not buying anymore.
So here's a little interesting thing. I think I ran it by Charles the other day. So while I was doing a little work checking out values, I mean, one of the things with Southeast OSB, it really follows single family starts a lot, right? And as starts drop, OSB doesn't have the same upside that it does. And I ran a comparison of 2x4 Southern Yellow Pine east side against east side Southern Yellow Pine, and it's got a pretty tight correlation. It's crazy, right? So the trade is if you can get OSB and buy it at a big discount, you buy the OSB and sell the 2x4 number 2 Southern Yellow Pine. That's just a guess. I'm not telling anybody to do that, but it actually has a pretty good.
It's okay. We have a disclaimer.
This is not financial advice.
You can say anything you want. We have a disclaimer. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you could just, talk to your own, your own personal financial situation before you
exactly
you do any of this.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Hey, Thomas, it was absolutely fantastic to have you on as always. I love getting your insights into things, and would love to have you back again sometime.
Anytime, guys.
Thanks, Thomas.
Appreciate it.
All right, Charles.
Hey,
Thanks, Greg.
Charles, take care, buddy. See you,
All right,
Yes,
guys.
sir. All right,
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Lumber Word. The Lumber Word podcast is dedicated to engaging conversations about the lumber industry, including trading ideas, market trends, and evaluations of overvalued and undervalued assets. We wish to emphasize that the discussions and opinions expressed in this podcast are purely for informational and entertainment purposes. They should not be considered as financial or investment advice. We encourage our listeners to make their own financial decisions, taking into account their unique circumstances and financial goals, and to seek professional financial advice if necessary.